Good evening and welcome. This last half an hour has actually made us all build a small little world of our own friendships, and this is what Rituda was known for. The last time that I remember him before I left for Italy was all the Patachitras out here, and we were looking over them, and he was saying, "Eta ekhane use korbo, eta ekhane debo." I mean, he was talking about costume, clothes. Whenever he came here, it was all about clothes and celebration and food. And because he was a diabetic, he would want my chunda, my ghar ka achar, and he would say, "Can't you put more sugar in it?" And I said, "It's only got sugar," And he had this amazing thing. And one of the last time that I heard when I was in Italy was the saddest news on the 31st of May that he passed on. I was in the middle of the ruins of Pompeii, and my family, my home called to say, "আপনি বলেছিলেন খিচুড়ি পাঠাতে, কিন্তু এখনই ওখান থেকে ফোন এসছে that উনি চলে গেছেন." So the food was packed to go to his home. I was a regular, like every morning at 4:45 or 5 in the morning, Rituda would call me and chat. We would just chat, and we don't about anything. It was just whatever his mood was, he would chat. And his national award, what will he wear? Acha eta bhalo lagbe kina? Do I look like a diva or not? And his thing was that he always admired. He says, "Do I look like her or not?" So he choshmata change korbe, oi kalo rime choshma porbe. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful memories. And then when he passed on, and I came back from Italy, the first week we presented the film Satyam Veshi right here and celebrated it. And Sangeeta has been a very, very dear friend, and the amount of work she's done on his live films, how closely she's known him, I couldn't have found a better person. And thank you so much for doing this for us this evening. So a big round of applause for Sangeeta and a warm welcome. It's really a pleasure for the Viva Studio Resource Center's team to welcome Sangeeta Datta, a dear friend, and she's a creative force to one of our textile talks this evening. Sangeeta is widely respected writer-director, independent filmmaker, and cultural commentator, and the director of Better UK and Stormcast Productions. Her body of work moves seamlessly across cinema, theatre, literature, and music, drawing from narratives that carry both intimacy and international resonance. Her award-winning feature film Life Goes On, starring Sharmila Tagore and Om Puri, along with acclaimed productions such as Bird of Dusk, The Dying Song, and Gitanjali 100, reflect her deep engagement with questions of identity, culture, and artistic expression. A published author and editor, including the seminal volume Rituparno Ghosh, Cinema, Gender, and Art, Sangeeta has long explored the intersections of cinema, aesthetics, and gender. Her scholarship and creative practice are enriched by her training in Tagore music, and her work continues to build meaningful dialogues between tradition and contemporary form. In this textile talk, Sangeeta Di brings her close collaboration and first-hand insights into the world of Rituparno Ghosh, reflecting on the evolving visual language of costume, texture, color, and design that shaped his cinematic universe. We're delighted to have her share this thoughtful and deeply layered exploration with us. It now gives me great pleasure to invite Sangeeta and hand over the mic to her. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
এটাকে অন করতে হবে শুনতে পাচ্ছ ভলিউম দাও পেছনে শুনতে পাচ্ছ ঠিক আছে Thank you, Darshan. It's always a pleasure to come and speak or make presentation here at Viva Center, which is like a second home for many of us. When you're surrounded by very beautiful connections with Rituparno, very grateful that you're here, Ruby. And of course there are lots of textile experts here, so that's not my area of expertise. It's an area that I will touch on. I'm much more interested today to share some stories with you all, some behind the scenes, the processes, behind this very, very prolific body of work, prolific and short-spanned body of work by my friend who was like a brother, Rituparno Ghosh. We were university friends at Jadavpur University, and much later I worked as direction associate with him. So my collaboration started later from 2003, the time when his world was also changing, and he'd just been commissioned with Chokhe Bali, the really big budget film that came into his hands at that moment, and he could think that it was going to be possible to cinematically match the vision with which he wrote. So quite often with regional cinema, with vernacular cinema, all of you know the reality. Many of you might have been here when Satyajit Ray passed away, when Uttam Kumar passed away in 1980, how that created this huge crisis within the industry. So Rituparno came in at a time when our film industry, the Bengali film industry, the Tollywood film industry was ridden with multiple problems. And the biggest was, of course, lack of funds, lack of possible ways of making things better. Things were really going downhill. The technical expertise was lost. We had much better technicians working in the 60s and 70s, even into the early 80s, but after that there seemed to be a sudden descent, and the reason for that was that the most talented people moved away. They went to Bombay, they went to Madras, they went to other industries where they were paid better. There was just no money, there was no economy which was functioning. The audiences had changed, they've moved to rural audiences, semi-rural audiences. The films that were being made at that time were not in any way remotely literature-based. That's always been a very big section of the middle class Bhadralok community or families who would watch films which were literary based or inspired. So that whole tradition of Satyajit Ray's films seemed to be disappearing. Mrinal Sen was coming to the end of his very prolific career as well, so his last few films were being made at that time. And it is in this scenario that Rituparno emerges after his years at Response, after his years in the advertising industry, and of course that was fantastic training ground for him with which he came into this world of cinema, of feature film. The first film, Heeraranti, didn't even get a commercial release. It was talked about, it was praised, but it didn't reach the theaters. And it's with the second film, Unishe April, which he collaborated with Aparna Sen and Renu Roy and made a film. They sort of co-produced this film with, again, a very small little budget. And the story goes that a producer had approached Aparna to make a film, and she said, no, I can't work in this budget, and here's this young filmmaker who wants to make a film, so why don't we do this film with him? And she had the main role anyway. She had the mother's role in a drama, in a very tense and also very sentimental drama about a mother-daughter relationship. So that's how that film was made, and at that point, with the sort of minuscule budgets people were working with, the idea of putting away a budget for sets or for costumes was almost unthinkable. It was, you were just lucky if you got your actors and put them into some sort of functional space and made a film. A lot of Unishe April did work that way because Aparna used her own wardrobe, she used her own resources. It was interesting seeing the daughter's part, because Devushri was almost playing a female Rituparno. And what did Rituparno look like at that time? He was quite plump, and he wore these baggy t-shirts and baggy pants, and wasn't really the suave guy who we saw much later. So he's almost at the other end of the spectrum. And you see Devushri exactly like that, in that green it's a one-day story, so you see her in one costume throughout, and she's wearing this green t-shirt and some baggy pants with a ponytail, and almost like a female version of Rituparno himself. So at that point, you saw an interest in handloom saris. Of course, he was constantly using handloom. The saris that we had in, there's one image here, I think, from Unishe April. That's Rituparno in the early years, where, of course, he always fancied, he wanted to wear things which were nice, but they were ill-fitting, they were baggy, they were not so great in that way, not even the work that he had. But he was quite fascinated with decorative stuff. He's also inspired by his parents, of course. His mother, who was an artist, and who was an artist, his father, who was a filmmaker. So there was a lot of creative energy at home, and his mother had a really nice wardrobe as well. She had a lot of handlooms, which were constantly brought out to be used as costumes in films. So that's Reenadi in her own saris and her own wardrobe. She wears, I think, just about 2 saris, and she's also in a blue dance costume briefly. She doesn't dance, but it's like she's come back from a particular dance performance. That's the scene. And there's Devushri looking, yeah, very de-glamorized. So I think this idea about this interest in handlooms or this interest in homemade sort of spun saris, not looking at the sort of georgettes and the silks and the chiffons that you were seeing in Bollywood. That's also interesting because these stories are grounded in middle-class homes. Most of the drama is in middle-class homes. And the interiors are important for Rituparna because his drama, at least in the earlier films, were always interiorized. They were within bedrooms, they were within the main drawing rooms or living rooms where characters walked in and out and they spoke to each other, and that's what created the dramatic force for a narrative, for a film. I think Aparna herself is such a big influence on Ritu. He's grown up wanting to be like her, like you said, always wanting to look like her, wanting to be better than her. So there was that competitive streak as well. I remember when we did Antar Mahal and Chokir Bali, which had lots and lots of jewelry, and Reenadi was also planning her Goinar Baksho, and he would constantly say, "Na, amader Goinar Bakshota Reenadi Baksho theke better hota hobe, beshi hota hobe, sundor hota hobe." So that sense of opulence as well, a sense of a lot. I think later when we talk about him as a person, we understood this, at least I understood this very, very quickly. There was also this desire to possess material objects, which he wanted to be surrounded by material objects. They could be paintings, they could be wonderful decor in this room, the 4-poster bed that he had in his room, the photographs that he loved, the blow-ups of the prima donnas, So he was surrounded by blow-ups of Aparna Sen, of Sharmila Tagore, huge, huge blow-ups of these actors whom he adored, whom he admired, but he also wanted to be surrounded constantly by beauty, by what he thought was beautiful. Quite often his spaces looked oppressive because there was so much, and then there would be things under his bed, there would be things falling out of his wardrobe, but that collection of beauty, collection of things which looked beautiful, which he wanted to possess, that was something he constantly did. It grew, it intensified as we worked with him. Again, you see cotton saris. It's not a Bengali sari, but the usual Durga Pujo, Bijaya, the look, the white sari and the red border, that look was recreated here. There was one of the characters, of the other characters, there was Mamata Shankar and there were other actors as well. One was wearing a gorod, but they were all wearing that red and white scheme. And again here the referencing goes back to Porama. All of you who might have seen Porama knew how iconic that image was of Rakhi turning around and the Thakur at the back, the Pratima at the back. So it's a sort of recreation of that and a fascination with very traditional frames over here. Exactly what you would expect. But to film it in a beautiful way, to frame it in a beautiful way, to have Ritu stand exactly where Rituparna stand exactly where she's standing. I couldn't find the other picture, which I have at home, but I couldn't find it here, of the 3 of them together. So they're almost flanking Durga and Saraswati and Rukhi, and the 3 women, the sisters-in-law, are standing in front as a trio. So that's Ritu looking the way he looks here around 2002 when we started planning Chokirbali. We had the luxury of planning, we had the luxury of a bigger cast and crew, and it was absolutely necessary to do that sort of research because A, it was a period film, 2, it was an adaptation of a Tagore, a very well-known Tagore novel. And then we were going to do this multi-location shoot because we were moving through Kolkata, we were moving through some smaller villages, and then going into Benares, opening up that huge panorama around the river in Benares. So it was going to be a big undertaking. And there was Aishwarya Rai, who was coming in from Bombay. Like Ritu constantly argued, that he wasn't the first person to do this. There was Satyajit Ray before him. There have been Bengali directors before him, like Tapan Sinha, who brought in Bombay talent into Tollywood. So it wasn't a very big or a very pioneering deed. He said this has happened before and we're doing it again. But there was that whole idea that Aishwarya, and this is post Devdas, immediately post Devdas, when she'd almost reached the height of her glory, was coming in to do a Bengali film. She was coming to do a vernacular film where necessarily, again, working conditions weren't good. They weren't as posh as Bombay. But she was coming for this one director with whom she wanted to work, and each actor constantly had this idea that if you worked with Rituparno, you'd probably get a national award. That was your way for a national award. So when Ash came in, although she was playing the part of a widow, and she had to look like a widow, 19th century widow, there was this whole idea, and I remember we spent so much time on this idea of creating color codes, of being able to see how we could contrast that colorless look of the character Binodini with Ashalata, who was the bride. So this is the widow, and this is the bride. And they had to constantly visually look a contrasting pair. They are Chokirbali, they are the two best friends, but they had to look completely different from each other. So to be able to start creating those sort of color schemes, how would you then bring in the men over there? What would Proshenjit be wearing? What would Tota be wearing? The browns and the creams, the Kashmiri shawls, which had to look period, the Punjabis that they wore, the kurtas that they wore, what would those look like? A whole influence of Rabindranath himself and his look and the family Thakurbari look which had to be brought in. So I remember the whole research time was fascinating. And I came in, of course, as associate director, but we had to overlook that whole spectrum of actors, of script and dialogue, of costumes, and of the sets. Ritu's brother, Indranil, was always, of course, his early collaborator and had done a number of films with him. So when you're visualizing and you're looking at characters who are going to be sitting, that particular space was also very important. How do you fill up that space? What is the period furniture that's going in there? What are the details? It's pre-electricity. So Obik had to plan a lighting scheme which was pre-electricity. It had to be completely candlelit. What would it look like if you were candlelit or if you were lit through, lanterns, so to speak? Or the sort of ritual that they had in the old houses where the servants would come and light up each hanging light. So all of that had to come together, and those details were all used. It was fascinating going to a number of antique shops to pick up those very beautiful lanterns and storm glasses, and then the entire period furniture that had to be picked up. So it looked like a real house, but Chokirbali was actually a whole set which was constructed here in Tollywood. An incredible piece of work that Indranil did. I don't think he's better at that. Indranil had trained previously with Shyam Gill on Discovery of India, so his training was superb. He'd come in with that eye for detail. And then he had his brother to work with. Ritu was like Satyajit Ray, sketching all the time. He would write, of course, but he would also be sketching. There would be illustrations, there would be ideas and frames that he would draw out as we spoke. And then we brought in this whole idea of also contrasting white and black, or cream and black. How are you going to do that? Because when Ash leaves, when Binodini leaves the home, then she has this black shawl around her. So the whole reference for me was French Lieutenant's Woman, which was also a very, very influential film around that time. And Avik and Ritu and I would sit and watch the film and see how you could give her this cape. The French Lieutenant's Woman was always wearing a black cape. And that cape, when it fell off, then you saw how gorgeously beautiful this woman was. Otherwise, she was hooded. And the French Lieutenant's Woman was also the other woman, the woman who was, not supposed to be in this man's life. So that whole thing about what was legal, or what were the boundaries between what was legal and what was illegal, the boundary here between the wife, who was Ashalata, and Binodini, with whom the man Mohendro has an affair. Binodini, who's the widow, Binodini, who's not supposed to be someone with any desire. Here we have the sexualized widow, and a lot of Chokebali is about the sexualization of the widow. So I'll just take you to the clip, which should come after this. Okay. I have for y'all a few references to the other films. At that time, there were films happening every year. So Bari Wali, then Shubha Muhurat, then Raincoat, which comes the next year, 2004. Antar Mahal the year after. Again, a feudal story of pretty much marital violence, or sort of forced marital violence. This whole story is such a dark story and such a violent story. And this was Soha's first entry into films in Bengal. Doshar. And then that little brief image also shows you the sort of ethnic look that Konkona sports. So it's a middle class, intelligent girl with a spine who's not going to take her husband's adultery or her husband's affair lightly. You begin to see that even in this very small frame. And then Abahuman, which is this very beautiful film, again with the married woman and the other woman and the director and the son. So this, of course, was a reference to Satyajit Ray's own life and his wife and his relationship with the actress that he was bringing in. So a reference to Madhavi Mukhopadhyay. And then the relationship with the son. All of this was very interesting, even in the way the wife and the other woman were coded in their clothes. So there's Chokebali, the very brief glimpse that we got of her being married. And then the other look that she sports throughout the rest of the film, of the white sari and the black shawl. Scene after scene, there was this contrasting between the cream or the white of Binodini and Ashalata in her reds and her pinks. A lot of these saris belong to Ritu's own mother, so he brought them out to dress Raima. Very, very young Raima. So here we are with a clip. It'll play out. এটা আমাদের চোখ চালু
কি করেছিস কেটে ছুরি দুটো একেবারে একসাথে করেছিস সে বলিস না ভাই অত দর্শকনা করলে আমি পারি ওটা একজন আমার থেকে বেশি না বল বারণ করতে গায়ে চুল লাগে না বাড়ি মনের চুল লাগে আমি অনেক বলেছিল উনি বললেন ঠাকুর দেবতারা নাকি এরকম করে কালিদাসের বইতে আছে শীত নাকি পার্বতী আমার বলার বলেছিল একদিন কেটে ছড়ে পেকে ঘা হয়ে যাবে তখন তোমার ডাক্তার বড় কিচ্ছু করতে পারবে না ও বলি যাস নে লক্ষ্মী ভাই আমার আর করবো না কি করে পড়তে হয় দেখিয়ে দিয়েছে একবার আর করবি না ঠিক তোর দিব্যি এই যে আজ তোদের বিয়ের 1 বছর পূর্ণ হবে আজ রাতে উনি যদি জোর করেন জোর করলে বলবো বালি বারণ করেছে কি ও ও ও, তা বলবো না, তাহলে অন্য কথা বলবো। কি বলবো বলে দে না ভাই মালিক। দুধকে দিয়ে দে। তোর কর্তাকে বলবি বিয়ের রাতে বিয়ের সাজ কেউ ছাড়ে? এই জ্যাকেট আমি খুলবো না। দেখি কেমন করে পড়তে হয়।
মাধব মিলন তরে আমার রাধা বাসুর সজ্জা করে বসি সুখ নিকুঞ্জ মন্দিরে।
কি করে?
আচ্ছা, এক্ষুনি চা দিও না। Here's another clip from Chukirali. And this is later when Vinodini has stepped out of her house and she's actually gone to his house, proposing that she's going to spend the night there. She comes and says, I'll spend the night here. And she actually asks, will you marry me? And this is where she comes dressed with a lot of gold jewelry. And interestingly, again, the concept here was Vinodini, the widow, who's supposed to be in white and absolutely barren in her look, is suddenly decorated with all this beautiful gold jewelry. So it's almost like the courtesan and the widow, two ideas coming together. As in the previous scene where you saw there was a sort of interchangeability between the widow and the wife, as she wears the blouse, as she covets that color red.
সুস্থ থাকতে আমার ঠিক ইচ্ছে করছে না। বসন্ত রেডি, আপনাকে ডাকছে।
আর আপনি?
আমি? আমার সঙ্গে তো আপনার কোনো লুকোচুরি নেই।
ঠিক, আমি আপনার সঙ্গে কোনো লুকোচুরি খেলতে আসিনি বিহারি বাবু, সোজা কথা বলতে এসেছি। আপনি আমাকে বিয়ে করবেন?
না, এখানে একটাই স্টিল আছে, স্যাডলি আমি নকুডুবির ক্লিপস এখানে আনতে পারিনি। A lot of good quality subtitled versions are now pretty strictly copyright. So it's getting increasingly difficult to do presentations without permission. And for permission you need more time. The prep time has to be longer. Nukadubi was also a film where Ritu Porno fell out with the producer. They didn't have a good relationship at all. He wasn't happy with the the final cut of the film. So they didn't give him the director's right to the director's cut. The film which actually went out got edited in-house by the producer's house, the production house. But Nukadubi as well, again another Tagore adaptation, and a period film, had a lot of research which went into it, and a lot of beautiful Bengali textiles which were worn by the characters. You can see little details over here. It wasn't, of course, it's textiles is not just the textile, it's also about everything, the accessories, what the girls are wearing in terms of jewelry, their hairstyles, the blouses which go with it. And by this time there was almost a controversy with the way films were being received, starting from Chokir Bali, because some people would say, this is not what Tagore wrote, this is not what Tagore's vision was, this is Ritu Parnow's vision. And rightly so, if somebody is adapting, there can be a different vision, there can be a departure. I don't think there was a departure in terms of historicity, there was no departure in terms of the intent or the way Tagore thought when he wrote the film. Tagore, when he wrote the novel, he actually said that he regretted the end of Chokir Bali. And that's exactly with that regret note, Ritu Parnow's Chokir Bali starts. And his whole focus is on the sexualization of the widow. And if you look at the broader picture now, starting right from the earlier films, that critiquing of patriarchy, that critiquing of hegemony, that critiquing of normative structures, that's getting stronger. So whenever he's taking up something which is also very well known or very familiar with readers in terms of literature, he shifts the focus to not just the broader story, but to a structure under which women are not being able to do what they would like to do. And even when they do gain that liberty, and when Binodini moves out of the home, she doesn't know what to do, she doesn't know where to go. So there's that directionless, aimless wandering, the whole Benares chapter where she begins to see a much larger world, she begins to see death on the ghats, and a very beautiful old woman who's dying makes her feel this is exactly what's going to happen to me if I carry on staying here in Benares. Like a widow, I will die like this one day. But moving out of that, finally when she writes a letter saying, I'm looking for my desh, desh খুঁজছি কোন দেশ, সেই দেশটা নিয়েই একটা বড় কথা, বড় চিন্তা, বড় ভাবনা, I would say, with Ritu's beginning to think or beginning to suggest to his audiences, what is this concept of home, homecoming? Is that the home in which you grew up, the home in which you felt oppressed, the home in which you didn't have freedom? Or is there a larger home outside, a whole country, where a larger sense of homecoming can happen? And all this is happening with the background of the Bengal partition. So there are layers in that narrative, very, very beautifully brought in. Yeah, and then these two stories they should be working parallelly. This is the change that's coming over the director himself, the artist himself, who Sharmila will have things to say here, I imagine. This is her familiar territory, but Ritu, starting with a story which Argo Kamal Mitra, who was his sort of long-term editor, told me when they went to South Point, they were class friends, and he says one of my earliest memories that I have of Ritu is him wearing a raincoat and doing a Helen dance. So he would love to dance. Even in school he would dance, and he would dance the woman's dance. So in school I didn't know him, but in college we knew how he was bullied. He was bullied, he was trivialized, he was humiliated by the general crowd of boys who thought he was effeminate, who thought he was not quite matching up to standards. And as a defense mechanism, he became this very strong intellectual. He was a great intelligent person, but his defense mechanism was to talk very intelligently, discuss films, discuss literature at a level which was much higher than his class friends. But yes, he did remember that period of humiliation and the period of loneliness and rejection that he had during his Jadavpur University days. This fascination with the stage, a fascination with the whole trope of performance that we see in right from the earlier films. Even in Chokir Bali, if you remember, there was a whole sequence, a very beautiful sequence in Benares where the courtesan is singing, the Baiji is singing her Thumri, and the Thumri then becomes a leitmotif in the whole later section of the film. So for him, bringing dance in through other actors or through other performers, that keeps happening. In Abohoman, you have that whole section where the young actress turns from an ordinary girl into a star, and that happens in the course of a song. There's also that reference to Binodini. Noti Binodini is something he was obsessed with, a character he was obsessed with. And that story is told not in one film, it's told through multiple narratives. And Noti Binodini is there right in the center of it. So this is not unnatural that at one point a boy whose body is changing, whose ideas about identity are changing, turns to classical dance and decides that I'm going to do this very well. I'd really like Sharmila to talk about that later, but we're moving here also about the performance of change. I call this the performance of change because he was enacting in public a change that was happening to a personal mind and a personal body. And this is something that he did very consciously, because Ritu, when he decided that this has to be done, and it has to be done in the public sphere, he was opening doors. একটা কথা বলতো খুব যে দরজাটা আমি একটু খুলতে পেরেছি, এই দরজাটা আমি ভেঙে দেবো। And whenever we've had these serious discussions about what he couldn't do, what wasn't possible within the country, this is something that he said at this stage, that I'm going to break down the door. And this was his way of doing it. এটা চলবে। So a clip from Chitrangada.
মিনকেতু কোমল মহারা খুশিরে দিয়েছ বাঁধিয়া অঙ্গ সহচরী করি এই মায়া লাবণ্য মোর কি অভিসম্পাত ক্ষণিক যৌবন বন্যা রক্ত স্রোতে তরঙ্গিয়া উন্মাদ করছে বলে
তুমি কিছু করতে বলেছো?
একটু ট্রাই করছি
তো
Yeah, so that's a clip from The Crowning Wish, Chitrangada. These three films which happened in rapid succession were it's called the Queer Trilogy, referred to as the Queer Trilogy. Films this film's directed by him, but the other two, just another love story, Arikti Premil Golpo was Kaushik's film, and Memories of Rain was Sanjay's film. But he was acting, he was performing in all the three films. And they come pretty much back to back. A film on which he had great expectations. He had really put his heart and soul into this film. And one reason why his health declined at that moment was because this film was rejected. It didn't do well at the box office. It didn't do well with the audiences. Clearly, it was much before its time. And something that he had thought was important to be said and done at that moment, perhaps the audiences were not yet ready for that, the middle class audiences. And what was happening, as we are talking about textiles and we're talking about color schemes, the whole admiration for a brilliant filmmaker who clearly was taking on the mantle of Satyajit Ray, that praise was coming to him. He was getting his national awards, he was getting his international recognition. But at the same time, there was also this denigration. The whole Rituporno-esque-ness that we talk about, people calling other boys, effeminate boys, Rituporno Ghosh. That whole juxtaposition of the 2 points was happening all the time. So he was facing recognition and he was also facing rejection and humiliation, which took him back to his university days. And at the end of it, we are talking about one person and one mind and how much you take and how much you're going to stand up for or make a statement about. So this pioneering step that he takes with sexuality, with alternative sexuality, talking clearly about androgyny. All of that thinking process is working when he starts changing his own dress codes. And that codification breaks now because he's talking much more about fluid lines, he's talking about clothes which both men and women can wear, he's bringing in a sort of Buddhist look, a sort of much more ancient look of a wise man. And then his entire features are also changing. And this film is also about a man who's going through a sex reassignment surgery. He's preparing to become a woman. So that liminal sort of space between genders, the sort of space which is breaking normative understandings of gender, of family codes, all of that is happening along with the way we see how people are being presented. So it's not just about colors or not just about fashion or style, but all of it is coming with a very clear political ideology behind it. And that's how it's created a legacy. It's created a whole space within which non-normative people are today being able to dress or be at ease with a look and a feel that was not possible before. Okay. Okay. So the other fascination that Ritu had, like I was saying, he's very taken with divas, and Rekha was another obsession for him. The film Utsav was a complete obsession with him. The Chokirwali reference of the black sari and the jewelry and the look and the hairstyle, all of that is Utsav. And there's that very famous scene where Rekha prepares the other woman to go to her husband. So she's the courtesan, she's in love with the man, but she's preparing the girl to go to the husband. That whole section that you saw of preparation, of getting her ready for the evening, is pretty much inspired by that as well. So here in Chitranbada, he's having a ball with all the jewelry that he wants to wear. Over here you can see that stage look. Again, Sharmila, your input here would be really, really good. The sort of way in which he's using the black and the red, the color coding, which happened right at the beginning of the film as well. Have you seen the film?
Yes.
Yeah.
But long
You
back.
remember. Yeah, these are films worth revisiting.
The diffuse light in the back is very beautiful.
And there's Arekti Prem Golpo, a film, a lesser seen. I think very few people have seen this film. But probably the most beautiful of the three. Where again, there's that Rekha look, and Kaushik recalls, when I made my documentary on Ritu, Bird of Dusk, Shondir Bhakti, Kaushik had this long interview in which he said, আমরা সকালবেলা থেকে এসে বসে আছি আর ঋতুদা তৈরি হচ্ছে, সে রেখাই হচ্ছে. 4 hours of dressing up, of makeup, of costume, all of that would happen before Ritu would emerge as this female character. And now on the last day, when this whole section was over, how he broke down and cried uncontrollably, because he said, now this woman is going away from me and she's never going to come back. Yeah, that's the look at the end, a look which extended beyond films. Of course, it was there, present in media, but it was also there very powerfully on TV, because he had his chat shows. So that Ebong Rituporno, that the chat shows that he did, and the look that he had, the decor of that particular room in which the guests were invited in to talk, was almost a sort of extension of his earlier films, where things were set within a drawing room ambience and very serious conversations would happen, or at least characters would reveal themselves. In Ebong, what's it called? Ghosh and Company, the next one. The earlier one is Ebong Rituporno. Ghosh and Company, you see that he's preparing, and he's actually doing it. He's taking a cup of coffee, or he's preparing the room, he's putting the books in order, and then people come in and they reveal themselves. And there's a sense of trust, complete implicit trust between the two people who are having a conversation. A lot of this stuff was, of course, from here. So Darshan will tell you how he would come here and try to, he would raid stuff. No? I mean, if I was wearing something nice, what did so your goina had to go to him, your jacket went to him, your clothes went to him, and we indulged in that a lot as well. But he would just pick up stuff, and these are sort of flowing silks and tussars and wonderful colors that he was getting himself into. Yeah, that created a storm in Berlin where Aditi Premier Golpo was in the selection, and he wore these clothes. And I suspect that is also yours. That dupatta is yours. Yeah, and so the top. And the Berlin jury, I mean, they went quite mad seeing this man with his coal-laden eyes and very beautiful silks. And then walking the ramp. These were all new experiences at that time, but a huge experimentation with the body and the look, and of course he loved all the media attention. He lapped that up. Yeah, that's just the last reference to the last year where most of the time Amitabh Bachchan was put into these Tagore-like jubbas. He was wearing these loose jubba clothes, and a complete transformation with Preeti Zinta in the tassar look, the plain tassars that she wore. I remember how she couldn't hide that look of surprise on her face on the first day when she came in, and Ritu pointed to me and said, "You just have to look like that, just kajal in the eyes, and that's all I want." And she looked at me like, "Who are you?" sort of thing. But that's exactly how she had to be, with her kajal in her eyes and a red teeth. I haven't kept track of time, so that's my presentation ending. But like I said, I'd really look towards Sharmila to add on a bit about Ritu's own personal interest in dance and performance and what you contributed to in Chitrangada.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think in many ways, when film Chitrangada was happening, the research and he was planning, a lot of things were happening in his life too. Because a year back, his mother passed away. And that was his almost the last thing that, okay, I don't have to look like something for someone. Because how he and his mother, they had very close relationship, and he would hate to hurt his mother with small things like, how to dress up and all that. So I met him when his head was shaved, and he was not wearing his jeans t-shirt. It was not that look. It was more of an in-between, just, kind of transition. He was going through that transition and wasn't sure what would suit him. And then there's this transition of Chitrangada, the princess, who was, no one knows, probably born as a female, but by his king father was forced to be brought up like a male. So throughout the film, those comparisons were coming directly or indirectly, and it reflected in the script. The Rekha look which we saw, that actually he was doing the role of Madan in Chitrangada. There's a, inside the film there's a Chitrangada dance drama happening now. So he was doing the role of Madan. then I said that then Madan is not dressed up like this. Why are you wearing it? And there were times he would go a little unreasonable because a whole lot of his life was coming into the dance, into the film. So apparently you can see that why should Madan, those who know Chitrangada, Madan is a male god, Cupid, god of love. So why is he dressed up like that? But if we think deeply, we are not only seeing Madan, we are seeing the character in Chitrangada, the director, the dance director in Chitrangada, trying to explain himself or trying to justify his looks. So that really suited, that he is like wearing something very unsuitable for the role of Madan, but his personality as the dance director at that time wanted this. And I understood it very well because we see it in male dancers sometimes where many of them would have liked to be ladies, young. I mean, there are issues about gender. What gender? Actually, gender is something which we are born with, but we also have a mind. Monero ekta ichha ache. It was used there.
Yeah.
Wish ache. So, and you know, we don't have space in our performing world for this monero ichha wala manushgulor jonne, whether it's a girl or a boy. And one thing he told me while, you know, all these gender issues used to, you know, that we used to talk about it a lot. One thing was very interesting that when you are, if you are tomboy, then your status is elevated. But if you are girlish, he talked about this in school and college life, as a boy, then your status goes down. This is a kind of something which has happened, you know, throughout years. I mean, not years, I mean generations. It comes from, maybe even in the animal world you can see such thing like male domination. Lions doing nothing, where the female ones are the ones who are hunting and, you know. Anyway, so coming back to this film, I don't see this film as just a film and how he has done, how the film has done as a film, box office. Because for him it meant a lot, personally. And if he was given a chance, like through the film he grew up. There are many instances, you know, there are many incidents, many beautiful instances, very touching, very sad, you know, incidents which had touched me. Now, if he could make a film, Chitrangada, later he told me that it would be like this. That was very interesting, you know. Anyway, so it was very nice, you know, going through this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like going through this, like after so many years, having Rituparna with us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I was thinking about it this morning actually, because in the past we've always marked his birthday or his going away day. Today, out of the blue, it's still February and it's many, many years. Suddenly you realize it's many, many years.
Suddenly it's very many years.
Yeah. And this is the book which we had written on Rituparna. At the time, it was almost immediately after he passed away. And I think that sense of that void that was created at that moment, which many people were experiencing in different spheres, it's almost as if to battle that, we said, no, come on, let's get down and finish this book. And we worked on it. It's still the most comprehensive book on his work. But there have been more recent works. Of course, the prized possession is first person, his own writing from the columns of the magazine that he used to edit. that first person, not yet translated, I think. There's no translation available, but if there are 2 volumes, Days publication. Then this is a book which came out last year, good one, and this book is out this year, which is very good news, and it's out from Jadavpur University Press. It's a translation of his scripts, quite a few of his scripts. So nothing to do with textile and costume as such, but if you wanted to have a collection of his scripts, it's a fabulous book. Moving away, that whole thing about acquisition or coveting, as I was telling you, and in a way for a person who's constantly denied human relationships, fulfilling human relationships, transfers it to objects. So,
He was coming to a neutral,
yeah,
neutral
he was coming to a
position.
position.
After Chitrangada, there were still a few years, there. When he was out of Chitrangada, then he was coming into the straight pants and kurtas, knitted, that texture. And that look and all that, earrings and all, but still very neutral. I think he was maturing. I wish he would be alive today to see how he would look like or fashion himself at least.
Yeah. And sitting in Switzerland, I remember we'd gone for the film festival and we talked about androgyny, and he's like, "Hey, don't you boja androgyny kile?" And we used to have these discussions. But later he brought that whole concept of androgyny into his look, and the fact that no, I'm not a woman, but there is no codification for a man to look like he looks like. I'm going to look this way. I'm going to wear my kajal. I'll wear my. And he was also evoking pre-colonial India, where men wore jewelry, where men were decorated, they wore silks, they looked glamorous. And he said it's only during the colonial time that the suited, booted look came in as the respectable male attire. So he was deconstructing that, highly boring as well. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes, I just had an observation and a question actually. Do you think, as she said, the Buddhism concept and all that? So basically, what I would believe is he has been a maximalist in all his films. So towards the end, was he moving towards minimalism? Was it something that was like kind of doing, as you say, he was simplifying, he was like sort of pondering about the acquisitions? Do you think that was a journey that he was doing from, he was tired of maximalism and then he was moving towards something which is simpler and minimalistic and more white?
Yeah, but don't you think that for a person who really waited till his mother passed away and his father passed away, father passing away was also the liberating moment, after which there was nothing to hold him back. So at that moment there is an excess of everything, the way he looked, everything that he was experimenting with in terms of his own looks, and the way it transferred onto the films as well, sort of extravagance that went with that. That would get toned down, and it was already, right? In the last few years, it was cutting down of that, even in terms of Chitrangada not doing as well as it did. I'm not talking about the merit of the film, it's about how it was, what expectations he had and how it went, and then that whole thing about, oh, you're going to get the national award for acting, and that didn't happen either. So a lot of that, I think, also was making him a bit more introverted. He was certainly wiser, and he'd taken that role of opening the doors for another whole generation so that they wouldn't suffer the way he had to suffer. I think he took that role, and that's why when I say a Buddhist look or a more knowing mind, a mind which was wiser at that moment. I felt a quietness in him. It could either be because his health was also failing, but there was a quietness in him at the end.
I think this is food for thought for everybody.
Yeah.
So we have different stages of life, and we change as people, right? So I know Ritu Varnapur only through his films and whatever, first person. So these are my only two, not like many people. And I think these changes are something we all go through, and so this is very relatable. Somebody like him, a larger than life character, also going through these feelings and changes, and this huge maximalist, like we sort of, minimalism is so hallowed, and then suddenly there's this maximalist who saying, no, this is also a great way. And then when he also is going towards something which is maybe quieter and maybe more internal, that's I think food for thought for me.
Yeah.
But I thought it was path-breaking when he did what he did, because that started the first conversation around it. Totally. And then it continued intensely. And I think it still continues.
Did they
Yeah,
think
Your
that
choices.
he will be happier if he changed his sex?
He was in the process of doing it.
Yes.
Which
He felt that he will be happier that way.
I wouldn't be able to say that, but maybe that's a journey he wanted to take. The only problem with it, you see, years of repression and years of mental health and anxiety and all the rest of it had made him this early diabetic. So
Yeah, and
that was
medication.
slipping, the health was slipping remarkably. So finally when he died, it's almost like somebody who's, sugar is plunging up and down so much that after a week of that, you're just going to have a heart attack. And that's the sort of thing that happened. If you're experimenting with your body so much, you're taking, some people were saying, oh, well, this is like a suicidal bit. But for a person who wants to go through that journey, it's his life.
And it was also medical science 13 years ago,
Yeah.
more than a decade ago. But then I think what
And a doctor who was asking him to pop 20 sleeping pills. I mean, it's crazy.
But then at least he sort of gave courage to a lot of people, which is so important.
For a whole generation. For a whole
And so
generation.
many people we read about them.
The
and
confidence, the ease with which they've
And the
been able-
option.
and a language to talk, to speak in. You know that very famous scene in Chitrangada where he's eating, he's having a meal, and it's always at the dining table that these conversations happen with the father and the mother, where he announces that I'm going to do this, I'm going to have this surgery, I'm going to go through this journey. It's what was possible for the next generation to do, to be able to have those conversations with their parents or friends or someone, rather than go through a lonely, rejected life.
recent March was very,
Oh my God.
very important scenes.
And very real scenes.
Very real fact.
I'm going to add one little observation about dining table. So I lived a big part of my life is in Delhi, and then I mostly in Delhi around a major part of the year. And I realized, I hear this from my Delhi friends, they have learned this from, they've seen this in Bengali movies, based on emotions movies. They ask me, how important is the dining table in Bengali life? तुमलोग क्या dining table से वो खाना जानते? What do you do in this dining table?
Everything.
It happens all the time in Rituparna Bhushan's movies, and this is when I realized this is very important in a Bengali household, middle class, upper, I don't know, but then it's not so important in other parts of India as it is in
my house
those
it
other
is.
sections.
See, that's where we
Or rather,
are.
Kolkata house. Kolkata house. But it's not so popular, not so essential in households in other parts of India.
So I just have one question, like how proud he was. I can, as much as I can read him, Rituparna was very proud Bengali himself. So you being so close to him, how proud he was of his being a Bengali.
Proud, yeah, of course. I mean, that was his identity. I think apart from everything else, he was so firmly entrenched in a middle-class Bengali household. Parents who gave him solid values, which he valued, and that's how the family would also, how the cast and crew became family. The people with same values, same family ideas, same way of thinking. Those are the people who stuck to him and stayed on these long journeys, and we all enriched each other in many ways. But I think his constant discipline to read and study and know more, like he would be up very early in the morning.
Right.
I remember after the long day shoot, then there'd be this whole group of people going home, এখন তোরা whiskey খাবে. He would, 9 o'clock, I'm off, তোরা বসে থাক, and he would go off to sleep. And he would be up at 4:35 in the morning. He had to do those 2-3 hours of reading in the morning, even before a whole day shoot would start. And then he would be writing his editorials. Sometimes he wouldn't finish at home, then they would chase him, even while a scene was being set up or the lighting was being done, he'd quickly write his editorial. So the way he was entrenched in the Bengali language and history and culture, the things that he could tell you about Vaishnav history, about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was so fascinated with that character, constantly bringing out more stories, and that was a project which remained unfinished, sadly. But all these Ramakrishna, Chaitanya, androgyny, these are the people who've been expositors of androgyny in our culture, in our history. to be able to bring them back, to be able to celebrate them, that's what he was constantly wanting to do.
So did Chitrangada outside Bengal, it's a very, very moving film and we identify with it because we're in Calcutta. Did it have an impact outside Bengal, in India or in the world stage? What kind of...
Yeah, I think it did, and I think if you're talking about international audiences, they were fascinated with Chitrangada, but more so with Just Another Love Story. I think that's the film which, did it ever get a theatrical release here? I don't even know if it got a
No,
theatrical
it did
release.
because I've seen it.
Yeah.
But it ran for a
months-
very short
No,
time.
for months at Priya. So this I know personally. And
I
that's
have
the
seen it in a
fascinating
theatre.
thing that I realized. I was in Kolkata and I watched this film here, and this whole audience, senior people, all sorts of audiences, nobody laughed. Unlike my, no offense, unlike my Delhi experience, and anything like that would evoke a lot of response from
Yeah, would be
laughter.
Uncomfortable laughter, yeah.
Not uncomfortable, just like humorous laughter.
No,
Amused
that's a
laughter.
defense mechanism.
But here, people, audience, everybody, see, everybody watched and there was no laughter. So that was something to say about Bengali audience.
We should continue this over.
Yes.
Yes, over tea.
Wow.
Yes, tea. So, but before that, a very small token of appreciation from all of us to Salim.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.